So, the Northern Independence Party, is it ever going to become an actual thing, or is it just a flash in the pan? I think it's going to be a flash in the pan. I really, really do. Because a couple of days ago on the Huffington Post, part of their manifesto was released. And one thing that was shocking to me is that the guy who was running this, and the guy who's like the main guy behind this all, basically said in it that he wants the North, once it achieves independence, for it to be a country run by referendums. I cannot stress what a dumb, absolutely dumb idea that is. And you've got no more clear example than the fact we've just had an incredibly decisive referendum fueled by very hard right-wing forces that have forced upon this country an absolutely unacceptable outcome that really no one who not only stood against Brexit saw coming or wanted, but even those who actually voted for Brexit, if you were to poll them, they probably would not want this direction either. Like I say, the infamous quote, only a fool would talk about leaving the single market. And yet, look where we are now. Indeed, trying to run a country by referendums opens up your country to so much, not only potential foreign interference, but big businesses and millionaires and billionaires being able to essentially force their will on the country because they can drop hundreds, if not millions of pounds into a campaign and essentially get the result that they want. Trying to run a country by referendums is completely and utterly stupid. You know, and then the question you have to ask is, well, when does it become acceptable to call for a referendum? You know, oh, well, we're going to change the laws on tyres. You know, the grip quality on tyres, they need to be at 30%. Is it justifiable to call a referendum on this? And remember, referendums are not cheap. They are quite expensive things to run. This whole idea of that seems to be emerging, especially on the right, and it is the right that are pushing this idea of a more focused, direct form of democracy in like having mass referendums like all the time, is not a good idea, which makes me think of the direction and influences that maybe this Northern Independence Party may be having. So, before we jump into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support me that way. So, today's article comes from The Guardian, and the title is the Northern Independence Party more serious than it looks? In recent years, the north of England has become a blank slate for whichever stereotypes the London-based media wants to foist upon it. Whether the topic of debate is the Red Wall or Left Behind, there is usually an assumption that Northerners are socially conservative, patriotic, Brexity, and even a bit racist. And Northern Safari media features in which journalists are parachuted into former mining villages to gather vox pops from disgruntled, often elderly voters have tended to back up that point. Now a new political movement, the Northern Independence Party, or the NIP, has started to make the case for the North and that it can and should be a place of radical potential rather than a reactionary backwater. From its origins as a bedroom Twitter account, the NIP has rapidly developed into a bona fide political party, though through official registration by the Electoral Commission is still pending. Now it plans to stand former Labour MP Thelma Walker in the Hartlepool by-election in May. Most bookmakers are placing the NIP in third place behind Labour and the Conservatives, ahead of both Reform UK and the Liberal Democrats. In spite of the gathering hype around the NIP, we should be realistic about its electoral prospects. Britain's archaic first-past-the-post system makes it extremely difficult for smaller parties to establish a foothold in Westminster, even when, like UKIP for much of the 2010s, they have had bags of money and several million voters. Yet, the NIP has none of UKIP's advantages, and most of its limitations. Barring an astonishing breakthrough, it will struggle to make much of a dent in the two-party system, and in the short term, it will probably do little more than to split the Labour vote in Hartlepool. But, for all its shortcomings, the rise of the NIP might be just the start of a more general realignment of British politics. The rise of a left populist party, however small, exposes major weaknesses in the strategy of the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. It proves that Labour cannot simply take for granted the votes of the younger, idealistic demographics that swung so decisively behind the party under Jeremy Corbyn. Labour has no chance of gaining power unless it manages to retain some, if not all, of the leftist votes and campaigners who helped it secure more than 3.5 million more votes than in 2017 election than it managed to gather in 2015. Given Labour's dismal recent polling and the general mood of apathy and bitterness among its grassroots members, the arrival of a new left-wing party shows that unless Starmer can make some conciliatory moves to regain the trust of this faction, and fast, his political project will soon be in serious trouble. Even if a minority of disaffected Corbynite Northerners gather behind the NIP, and if its example inspires other left breakaway parties elsewhere in the country, Labour's downslide will accelerate. But there is another side to the NIP narrative, which goes beyond Labour and party factionalism. At a time when debates around the constitutional future of the UK gather pace, NIP's social media campaign shows how matters of regional identity can be explored in an engaging way. In spite of the decade of government's rhetoric full of buzzwords, such as the Northern Powerhouse and levelling up, the north of England is still, in far too many areas, the poor relation of its southern counterpart. NIP's social media graphics have highlighted the key statistics that demonstrate this ongoing north-south divide. And in experimenting with the idea of total autonomy for Northumbria, a nod to the Anglo-Saxon kingdom stretching between the north and the Humber, NIP is seeking to open up conversation about how England could be reorganised more fairly. In this context, it desires its claim to the contrary. The NIP's demand for national northern independence is more of a provocation than a practical goal. But this earnest politicking comes with a more impish public face. This is a project that is mindful of the risks of cliché and nostalgia when it comes to defining the northern cause. Instead of pious avowals of northern identity, NIP's social media pages reclaim and reflect stereotypes about northern culture with stylised portraits of whippets and tongue-in-cheek calls to nationalise Greggs and ban Dominic Cummings from Bernard Castle. This approach to party politics will no doubt irritate some, but in an electoral landscape dominated by the blue-rinse nationalism of Boris Johnson's Conservatives on one hand and the cautious, business-like Labour Party on the other, NIP's tactics are a challenge to established parties that need to raise their game to reconnect with younger voters who don't see much future in the political debates of the 2020s. And one of the latest NIP mottos is this: we joke, but we're serious. They might just be onto something about this. So, the NIP, what will happen? Ultimately, I generally do think this could split the Labour vote in Hartlepool, which ultimately will be bad. and it could lead to the Conservatives winning that seat, and that will be bad for everyone. And as we've said before in this country, sometimes the left is just not as pragmatic as it should be. Now, I have no problem with the NIP existing. However, in this case, in a serious by-election of this type, which again could, if the Conservatives won it, could take their majority from 84 to 85, or it's 86, I can't remember the exact number now, but this is once again very, very worrying, because as we've said before, and the article pointed out, they have all UKIP's shortcomings and none of its advantages of its millions of voters and millions of pounds and multi-millionaire backers. Now, ultimately, this could do some good. This could actually galvanise Labour to maybe adopt more leftist policies and actually try and re-engage and get more of these people back. Because, as I've said before, the left in this country, even though we lost in 2019, is in a really, really good position. And the only party of how we gain power, the only party where we can affect change, is the Labour Party. And I know a lot of people out there are upset. I know, I understand, I get it. I'm upset too. But the only way we gain power is through Labour. And we have to go back and look what the Corbyn years did right, what the Corbyn years did wrong. And I've said it before, it's a matter of sometimes basic PR. And I know a lot of people got upset at me when I said, oh, you're talking about, lying and spin doctoring. No, I'm saying we have to be better at explaining our positions and explaining our policies and how it would affect people. And we've got to get better than that, because if we don't, then every time we get power, like in the Corbyn years, the media will just have a field day, and then we will lose massively, because if we cannot at least gain some sort of mass media support, then we will never, ever gain power. And I know that sucks, but as I've said before, sometimes if you want to affect change, it is far better to have a foot in the door than both feet outside. And that remains completely 100% true in this case. That is why I have joined Labour, because the only way the left gets into power is through the Labour Party. And because we are Labour members, we can push for more leftist policy. This is how we do it. This is how we affect change. And yes, we had a big loss, of course, under the Corbyn years and all the stuff that went on there. But we have to learn from it. We have to learn from it and take it on. We can't just go, we've lost, we're just going to start another party. Because that party will not do or achieve anything. If you want to actually make change, you have to be in power. And the only route to power is through Labour. So, as always, please, thank you for watching, and please do remember to hit the like and share button, and of course down below there is a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.